Tim, for introducing me. So yeah, we're going to look broadly at two questions. Okay, we're going to look at why should Christians be informed and involved in the climate and ecological crisis, and what can we do individually as a church and local community. And I have 20 minutes, and Chris Reveley, as my pastor, will tell you that I speak very quickly, so that's all right for everybody. I want to stimulate our sacred imagination about what is possible. Okay, because the environment and the communities that we live in and that you serve in are not separate things, they're totally connected. And I hope that it's a gentle start to the conversation. I'm happy to support you as you go forward. So there will be lots to take in. Please don't feel you have to write it all down. I'm only going to share one slide at some point in a minute, but I've given Tim all the links. So please don't write down anything I say about groups that I'm telling you to maybe check out or resources. They'll all come later. Just write down anything that impacts you. That's really what I want to say. And the rest of it, just immerse yourself and take it in. So some of us are further on the road of understanding than others, but I'm assuming a few things. So the first thing I'm assuming is that we all agree with the scientific data that we are entering the sixth mass extinction of species, and it's caused largely by human activity. And I've attached a link because people say, mass extinction, what does that mean? So I've sent you a link over, you can read about that. That's just the first thing I'm assuming we agree on. The second thing I'm assuming we agree on is that our climate is out of whack. You just need to open a newspaper, hotter global temperatures year on year. The planet is the hottest today that it's been for the past 12,000 years. Flooding, drought, starvation. You know the story, you're very informed. But as per usual, the worst affected are the majority world, who have done the least to cause the climate problems and the carbon emissions. So Tim's just going to pop a screen that just literally put the slide up, and in it, I'm just going to explain for 2 seconds. You're going to see a map, two maps will appear on the screen. One of them, wait till it arrives. One of them, you'll see the red color is a CO2 emission. So basically you can see the screen there showing you, and you've got the second one, haven't you? I know as well below. So basically they're a flip of each other. So if we go back to the top one very quickly again, the red colors, the really dirty, nasty kind of emissions are coming from these countries. No surprise, the developed, if we call it, world. Now to the next one underneath, Tim, would be brilliant. But we have the least impact on us, and the ones that are causing the least damage are going to suffer and are suffering first. So thanks very much, Tim. If you can unshare that, that'd be brilliant. So it's really important to realize the climate crisis is a racial and poverty issue, and it's deeply unjust. So of the 690 million people going to bed hungry every day, it will get worse. Sea level rising, we agree. Bangladesh, unbearable heat, Mali, Burkina Faso, well, it'll just increase mass movement of people. So if you just throw in there the odd tsunami, the odd hurricane, you can see the scale of the problem. So you and I, one of the things we have to do is amplify the voices of the majority world. So unanimously they want action but aren't being heard. So this is your first practical takeaway, even in the introduction. One practical way you can engage meaningfully is with church members who send money home to their families in any part of Africa, Indonesia, India, etc. Ask them to share regularly in your church the very real climate challenges facing their families and the land they love. Incorporate prayer from their countries, open up conversations in your churches about the truth that the climate crisis is a race, poverty, colonialism, slave trade, and industrial revolution kind of issue, and they're all embedded in the climate struggle. We need to ask questions. Why are the countries they send money home to poor? What can we do to challenge the systems that keep them poor? And if you're a church involved in mission in these countries, then we have to ask these deeper questions, or we simply don't have integrity. So most are poor due to overexploitation by wealthy, powerful nations, one of which is where we live. And we see it again in a minute, played out amongst the amongst the COVID vaccine program. Africa, 1.216 billion people. Well, they're going to miss out till 2024. Moldova, arguably the poorest EU country, no vaccines at all at the minute. Money speaks and money rules. And we know this, we do know this. So I think Luke 12:48 is cool to remember here. To him or her who've been given much, much is required. So that's the second thing, is I want you to, I expect you to understand it's a racial issue. And then lastly, this is my assumption before we move on to what can we do, is I'm assuming we're committed to telling the truth about what is happening, okay? Because if we understand the crisis, we must communicate it. In August, I decided we needed to buy sandbags and fire beaters because we'd been flooded at the front of our house in Northwood Hills twice, and Ricelit Woods was a tinderbox, okay? And on top of that, our house is slipping down the hill, it's subsiding because climate change is causing London clay to shrink. Telling the truth to ourselves, okay, is the first important step. And that's what I really want to start with. If we don't tell the truth to ourselves, then we're not going to go anywhere. And governments have failed to tell the truth, failed to reach the Paris Accord. So Christians, as us and other people of faith, have got to hold the government to account. But here's your health warning, guys, okay? Telling the truth comes with a health warning, because the climate crisis is a wicked problem. It's called a wicked problem. I've sent you a link to that as well. It's incredibly complicated. It's very frightening. And it calls for individual and your church and your community and the system to all change at once. And we don't like change, if we're honest, particularly when it's to do with money, which it is to do with. And your church will kick back. I just want to warn you of that, because many come to church to be fed Jesus, and on the menu is not this kind of engagement. So just be aware. Just drip feed, lovingly drip feed, but I'm just warning you, you'll get kicked back. Because there's a link between climate change and trauma to the brain, because we are hardwired to be disengaged. And I just want to ask you, rhetorically speaking, anyone here want to burn to death, drown, or starve? Of course not. So the temptation is in congregations, they don't want to talk about it, and they don't really want you to talk about it, okay? We just want to come talk about God. The temptation for Christians is, please be mindful of this, all of us. Don't cover the problem in theology about end times, rapture, and groaning of the creation. Because none of us know when Jesus will return, okay? That's what we can guarantee that. And I don't want to hand it back to God trashed when I've caused part of unremitting suffering to billions of his children. So that's the assumption, the background to what I'm assuming. So now, having assumed that, what can we do? Okay, you would think that knowing the truth leads to personal behavior change, but actually it doesn't. If we don't have the heart change and we don't link into loving your neighbor, okay, and God's heart for the poor and for justice, then we just end up with a tick box exercise. And you know that yourself. You get a sheet and you tick it off. You go, we're quite well on LED lights, blah, 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 blah. As good as individual changes are, eco-loo rolls, recycling junk, cycling, etc., 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 they are not enough. So everything we do individually, you and me, needs to be scaled up in our churches and scaled up in our communities, okay? Because lifestyle change and system change are two sides of the same coin. Climate Outreach, again, I'll give you the link, is an organization, and they lead the way on behavior change. And they found 3 areas that are the most important to start with. And they are the areas of transport, food, and energy. This is for you, your church, and our community and our globe, right? So transport, food, and energy. And they use this little framework: avoid, shift, improve. And you can, the brilliant thing is you can go home and look in your lounge, your kitchen, and say avoid, shift, improve on every single situation. I'm going to hone us in on some big ones, because then we can apply them to our churches. The first one they say is avoid flying, especially long haul flights, okay? Because flying is the most carbon intensive activity we do. Travel how the world can afford. Now, I just want to give you some context. A return flight to China carrying 300 people releases the same carbon as driving a car for approximately 600 years. So flying is the biggest blow on our personal footprint. But as a species, our biggest driver is, our biggest carbon is driving. So how can you apply this to your churches? Okay, regularly encourage all the benefits of cycling, car shares, post-COVID, walking, explain why. Join the dots in your congregation about health, pollution, well-being, justice. Join the dots, celebrate it, have a no-car Sunday, that kind of thing. Hold events that wherever possible are local. Think about church weekends away. Are they near train and bus routes? Encourage mission in the UK, not abroad, for short mission. Get youth workers up to speed. Are they involving youth kind of in cars a lot, or are they kind of trying to do things in a different way? Do we drive short distances? Because they're the killers, I'll be honest, is the short driving. Do we go without flights and take the train? Is the car park full of staff car park, staff cars? Do we have a decent bike storage? These are the regular drip feeding to your congregation, the benefits of low carbon travel, and keep transport on the radar. One that you can get involved with, Hillside particularly, Holy Trinity particularly, is involved with a school, okay? But support your local schools in the issue of carbon from cars outside school playgrounds, okay? The link between asthma, Alzheimer's, and car fumes is known. Check out Mums for Lungs. They look at this whole area around kind of trying to get schools. Support your schools to keep a clear air zone around the schools. That's just in terms of kind of greening the transport. 40,000 premature deaths every year in the UK from air pollution. Okay, now we rightly make a fuss about COVID killing people, rightly, but we never ever make the link and shout about the 40,000 premature deaths from car fumes. So link the dots, support your schools. An international example you're going to have to grapple with on this one is any area in your church which supports volutourism. So be mindful and careful about short-term mission. I've said that. It's deeply problematic to be involved with things like World Challenge, where young people do £4,000 week, do the fundraising, and then they go for 4 weeks. Their impact on the poorest people is undeniably linked. So just be very careful about the unethical volutourism. Support long-term mission, yes, by all means. Just be very mindful of the short-term mission. And then lastly, in our local area, what are we dealing with in Hillingdon? My goodness, we've got the illegal third runway, which is going to tip us well outside the Paris Accord. What are we doing about that? Are we vocal about that? What about the contentious HS2? Engage with these things and engage with your communities. What do your local communities say they're worried about in terms of the transport part? That's the first thing they say. Second thing then, they say shift. So first was avoid, second shift to a low carbon diet, which means mainly plant-based, wherever we can, including eating out, eating in. Okay, but make sure you communicate to your churches why. 15% of global emissions come from meat and dairy, especially with the farty cows. The cows are the worst by far. Beef is a disaster. Okay, massive amount of food waste in the dairy meat industry built in. Then there's methane, excess land use, antibiotic resistance in pigs, Amazon deforestation for growing beef. And then there's a link between COVID, wet markets. Let's be honest around what we're doing in the animal thing. There's plenty enough food to feed the 690 million starving if we feed the world how it can afford. The world's poorest people need us to change the way that we eat. Bangladesh get their sole protein source is from tuna, but 95% of the big fish stock in the whole ocean has gone. I don't need fish for protein. They do. So let's be mindful of how we eat according to what the world can afford. What does that look like in your churches, guys? Okay, tweak areas you're already doing. Explain why. So plant-based church communal meals become the default, where people have to actively choose the meat option. And it's funny, it's a proven tactic. It reduces, if you have to opt in, most people don't be bothered. They're quite happy not to have it. So having an opt-in option, offer alternative milks at coffee time, normalize vegetarian meals, change the narrative around this. Poor me, I'm not allowed to eat meat. I can't eat bacon sandwiches anymore. Change the language around how we talk about celebrating around food that the planet can afford, okay? Think about your cheap meat-laden barbecues and your hog roasts. Please think about that, because that is modeling to the community something which we know from all the data needs to be considered deeply. Talk to your youth leaders. Are they just dishing up trash food for the kids? Think about what we model on every single level. The men's breakfast. Come on, men. Not all bacon heavy. Think around these things. The majority world can't afford us to eat like we're eating. I just want to link something else, climate outreach. They're not a Christian climate research project. They've shown, and it's true, the link to every single part of the climate crisis is greed, okay? This 100% obsession with consuming and growing. The richest 1%, 80 million people, consume more than twice what 3.9 billion people consume. So we need to be thinking around this. And our food is it. We eat too much, we chuck too much, we produce too much. So we know it's an issue, the food thing. But the exciting thing is, we have something to say in that space, don't we, about greed? Didn't Jesus talk more about greed than he did about prayer and faith together? So there's something in here we need to pay attention to and offer communities where people can actually start to think about the deeper motivators, about what is greed trying to fulfill. And then the last thing they say is improve. And this is their energy impacts, switch to green tariffs, solar panels, heating, all those other things. Again, what can you do to your church? The easiest thing is to do what Tim and Emmanuel have been doing, and I know Holy Trinity have, and Fairfield at some point as well in the past have been trying to get involved in the Eco Church Awards. If you're a Protestant church, you have Eco Church Awards. If you're from the Catholic tradition, you have Live Simply Awards. And they focus on largely buildings and energy and that kind of thing, green tariffs, green housekeeping, all those sorts of things. I want to give you a little caveat. They're really quite easy up to silver. When they're external changes and organizational changes, gold really kicks ass, and that's where you start getting the change in the community, your involvement and change there. So those are the three things. Now I just want to say, I'm now going to give you some really practical outworkings of these. This is where you might want to just scrabble down one line. The first thing is, if you don't have a climate emergency steering group, set one up. If you don't have a group championing Eco Church or Live Simply, set one up. You must include young people on it. Okay, Hillingdon Council declared a climate emergency and did not vote to put young people on it. The young people are inheriting the mess we are part of, so we must have some young people on it. Position that group, please, as important as any other group in the church. It's not niche. Safeguarding the planet and all life is not a niche activity for some hippie here. It's everybody's responsibility. Protect the group with everything you've got from criticism, because they will get criticized, and keep it center stage, okay? And then get that group to do your mission. Go into your community. What is on your heart? What can we support you with, etc. This is mission. The next thing, get those leaders of your church groups together once a quarter. And I'm really happy to volunteer, if it helps you, to chair that, to bring them together, to say, what's working for you? What liturgy have you got? Shall we get together with the MP? How can we get other faith groups to work alongside us? Wouldn't that be great? So the aim is to get those leaders together to support. Don't reinvent the wheel. What's working, and share that. Third thing you can do is support all your young people. Greta Thunberg, the climate change strike, support them, pray for them from the front. Signpost them towards the Youth Climate Change Network, YCC, and I give you that link. I've worked with a climate activist as old as 90 and as young as 7. And they are the ones who are shouldering the burden and the anxiety of global politics, economics, COVID, lack of schooling, and the climate crisis. They need you guys. They really, really need you guys out front. And I just want to say one heads up. If your church is losing members under 20, there's a lot of evidence in a minute which will say young people will not engage with the church that doesn't take justice, climate, race equality, and inclusion seriously. If you want to be missional to young under 20s, get this going in your churches, because there's nothing more important to them than this. Next thing, practically, set up a Climate Sunday. Use the Climate Sunday resources, all on the link. Loads of resources. Do a Climate Sunday in your church. Easy win. Next easy win, check out Tier Fund's Climate Emergency Toolkit. Brilliant stuff, just released on the 26th of January. And they go along with the Prepare, Declare, Impact. So to declare a climate emergency is what they're calling for. The next biggest one, this is my Operation Noah hat on, is divest. Okay, let me just tell you that the Church of England alone, let me see if I can, has over 100 million pounds of assets sitting in fossil fuels. 100 million pounds. Operation Noah helped get churches to divest from their fossil fuels and their pension. Biggest thing you can do. Biggest thing you can do. Personally in your pensions, and their Quakers are out front, as you'd expect. United Reformer out front. Church of Ireland banging it out of the water. And Catholic dioceses of Go Catholics, Catholic dioceses of Lancaster, Middlesbrough, and Arundel and Brighton are also there, but loads of work to do. So divest. And then the last two things sound very obvious. Pray. Pray, pray, pray. If we don't, we are overwhelmed. And if we don't, we end up breaking. And this is God's planet. He's invited us to be part of the recreation, but pray. And then the very final thing is own your greatness. Okay, Peter Singer's book, The Life You Can Save, says this: if you do not celebrate and publicize what you are doing for the poor, okay, and in areas of justice, everybody else thinks no one's doing it. Celebrate it. Tell your congregation how incredible the church down the road are. Celebrate every single thing that's going on in this area so we can be beacons of light. The community look to us and go, we know where we're safe. We have a church in this area, it makes me want to get tearful now, who take safeguarding of our children seriously. That is powerful stuff. So link that, celebrate your greatness, and let's lead from the front as the church in this area should be doing. Back to Tim. Don't know whether you want to have any questions now. Plenty to think about. And honestly, I'd be happy to come back and help you in any way, shape or form, because I believe in the local church.